Alrighty. I think that's a good group of folks that we've got on. Hi, everyone. My name is Alison Rice. I'm the campaign director for Amy Sangiolo's mayoral campaign. I want to thank you all for joining us this evening to talk about an important issue. I hope that we can have a respectful conversation about historic preservation. I know many attendees here tonight are outraged at the destruction of one of the few historical landmark properties in Newton, and it's great to see so many residents stand up and speak out against this demolition. Before I turn it over to Amy to start this forum, I want to first set a few ground rules. Really importantly, we ask that all participants treat others with respect so that we can have a constructive discussion about how to handle the property at 29 Greenwood Street moving forward. A couple of key rules. I want to ask that you please keep your microphones muted when you're not speaking, and please do not interrupt others. We have the ability to manually control participants' microphone and cameras or remove them from the meeting if necessary, but we hope we will not be dealing with disruptions and won't have to enforce these rules. The rules will be enforced, however, as they need to be. Much of this forum will be an open discussion between Amy and the community, so you are welcome to use the raise hand function or to ask questions in the chat. Myself or Amy will be calling on participants who have questions or comments, so please refrain from speaking until we give you the floor. If you do use the raise hand function to ask a question, please stay on mute unless we call your name to ask your question. And when you finish asking your question, please go back on mute. This is a really important way to help keep our conversation productive and avoid folks talking over one another. Lastly, this meeting is being recorded and is also being live streamed to Facebook. So please keep this in mind and be respectful. The goal of this forum is for Amy to connect with residents and create space for folks to voice their feelings about the destruction of the Gershom Hyde House, for Amy to share her background and passion for historical preservation with you all, and for all of us to have a discussion about how to strengthen historical preservation ordinances and the Newton Historical Commission to protect our remaining 25 landmark properties and other historical buildings around the city. We've got some great Zoom tools at our disposal that will help make this conversation interactive, keep you all engaged and involved. As I mentioned, you can use the raise hand function to ask a question, use the chat to ask a question or comment on something that is said, as well as the polling tool. We'll pose a few questions throughout the session this evening, and each question will just pop up on your screen, and all you have to do is click answer. So why don't we test it out with this question? If folks see that pop up on their screen, you can go ahead and click yes or no. Do you live in Oak Hill Park around where Gershom Hyde House is located? And it looks like it's working for some folks. A lot of folks do live around the area, which is great to see. And we really appreciate you joining here to kind of give your experience about this, what's going on locally around you. About 86% of folks actually don't live in the area. We've got 5 folks who do as the results come in. Keep on pressing those yes and no's. We'll give it a couple more seconds. All right, you'll get to see these results. And that's how this poll tool is going to work. There'll be 3 more of these throughout the session this evening. So we'll give everyone a chance to use this tool moving forward. So thank you for listening to all of our ground rules and following them, and thanks for taking that first poll. We're really excited that all of you are joining this conversation on an evening when the Red Sox are playing, marathon today, big, busy day. So we really appreciate you taking the time. Now I'd love to turn it over to Stephen Farrell, who helped gather so many of you tonight to join this conversation. Stephen?
Thank you, Alison. First, I want to thank each of you for joining in this meeting tonight. And of course, I want to thank Ms. Sangiolo for being here to speak with us. Over the past 5 months, many of us, 770 at last count, have been engaged in trying to support the Newton Historical Commission in resolving the 29 Greenwood debacle. When Mayor Fuller addressed the Historical Commission in August about Greenwood, I believed it was important for us to also hear what Ms. Sangiolo, the candidate for mayor, thought not only about that specific issue, but about preservation in the broadest sense. What our mayor, city council, and school committee candidates who want our votes believe about preservation, about preserving our past, is as critical to me as their opinions about building our future. Because preservation and development are inexorably intertwined, please vote on November Second, for proven preservation candidates. I look forward now to hearing Ms. Sangiolo how she will address these issues as mayor. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Stephen, for that great introduction, and thank you all for being here. As Ali said, you know, it's Indigenous Peoples Day, Marathon Day, where there's a Red Sox game, and it's also my husband's 57th birthday. So thank you for all for coming. So my name is Amy Sangiolo, and as many of you know, I am running for mayor. But before we get started on the topic for tonight, I just wanted to give you a little bit of background about me. So I am an attorney, and I'm currently working as a consumer advocate with the housing division at the Attorney General's office. I am also a former city councilor who served on the city council for 20 years. 18 of those were on the zoning and planning committee. And I have a real record of supporting historic preservation. I worked with neighbors here in Auburndale to create the Auburndale Historic District. This was in response to concerns that LaSalle College would tear down and destroy many of the large Victorians that are part of their campus and ruin the historic fabric of Auburndale. I was a strong supporter of the Newtonville Historic District, and I was also a supporter to create a Newton Highlands Historic District, but sadly that did not pass. I've nominated numerous properties for local landmark status, including St. Bernard's Church, the church on the corner of Comm Ave and Auburn Street, the old Working Boys home site near Nahanton. And on that particular project, I worked with Michael Clark, and I submitted a proposal for nomination to the Mass Historical Commission. I've also advocated in front of the historic district commissions, as well as the historical commissions, to preserve the historic integrity of certain structures, as well as assist homeowners to find balance in getting approvals. So the reason tonight that we're holding this forum is because of the destruction of the Hyde House at 29 Greenwood Street. So before we get started, we're going to ask our second polling question. So how many of you on this call are aware of the demolition of the Hyde House on 29 Greenwich Street? I imagine it's most of you, but just in case, let's ask.
Yeah, definitely most of you.
I kind of anticipated that, right? So I just want you to know that I am just as outraged as all of you about the destruction, and I want the city to take legal action against the developer. Frankly, I think that $300 a day fine is pennies to a developer, and the city has to take some real action to punish for the demolition of this historic structure. Otherwise, there's no reason to have this type of protection. This is supposed to protect we're supposed to be able to protect the 26 landmarks that we have in the city, and we're not doing that. And if we don't enforce in this particular instance, then there's really no reason to have these types of protections. My understanding is that the Newton Historical Commission will meet on October 28th, and the Zoning and Planning Committee will meet this Thursday, October 14th, to discuss amending the demolition delay ordinance. So tonight I'm trying to bring attention to the issue of these meetings to encourage civic engagement and pressure city officials to uphold our historic protections. So here's my oh, I'm sorry, there's a hand raised. Helene?
Marshall had a question.
Okay, Amy, my question is this. It's really kind of a two-parter. I agree completely that a $300 a day fine is not going to have any effect on either this developer or, more importantly, future developers in terms of essentially ignoring requirements to go before commissions and boards to have permission before they do something like this. My question is this. I would think what would be very effective is that if a developer does this kind of thing of ignoring the requirement to go before the historical committee and get permission and just goes forward and destroys an historical setting, it would be that the penalty not be a nominal dollar amount, but that the effect is that the developer, for some number of years, 2 years, 3 years, cannot seek permission from Newton to do development in Newton. I think that that would have, it would get their attention. My question is, does such a penalty for just bulldozing your way through and not seeking the appropriate permission, A, does it exist already? And B, if it doesn't, is that the sort of thing that, in your view as mayor, you could take a leadership role either in getting an ordinance through the city council, or maybe that kind of authority exists in the mayor without the city council's authorization?
Thank you for that question, Marshall. Those are very good questions. I think we're going to get to enforcement as we go on through the presentation. So if you would be a little patient as we go through and continue to sort of do an assessment of what has happened, and where do we stand, and then I think we can get to the enforcement issue. Is that okay?
That's fine.
Okay. So I mean, those are important issues that you raised, but let's go kind of through what happened at 29 Greenwood. I mean, my understanding of the timeline is that it was originally constructed in 1744. It is one of only 26 landmark sites in a city, and that's supposed to give it the highest level of historic protection in Newton. And it was the 4th oldest house here. The previous owners obtained a certificate of appropriateness from the Newton Historical Commission years ago, giving them permission to restore the house and construct a rear addition. The property appeared before the Newton Historic Commission for extensions to this in 2017, in 2018, and then again in 2019. In January of this year, the current owner of the home, Ty Gupta, purchased the property and started work based on the previously approved plans. It's unclear if he had the right to work on it based on the plans approved for a different owner. And that's another issue that we probably would want to look at, whether or not it should convey if we're looking at ordinance amendments. But instead of restoring the house, the developer almost completely demolished a structure and replaced it with entirely new framing, all but demolishing the house. It's also my understanding that an inspector from Inspectional Services visited the property in late April and issued a stop work order on April 30th. The property has been in limbo ever since, with that fine accruing each and every day at $300. They're not collecting on it now. And my own opinion, as I stated earlier, is that the $300 a day is nothing for a developer, and on properties that can sell for millions of dollars later on. So where do we stand? Right now, the developer still has yet to submit plans to the NHC for approval. I think it was in August at the Newton Historical Commission meeting. The lawyer, along with architect Don Lang, asked for a review of proposed remediation plans to see whether or not they were on the right track. They did not ask for a vote of the plans, and I understand that there was kind of a back and forth between the commissioners and the city's law department on whether or not a vote was necessary or a vote was required. So as I said, I believe the next Newton Historical Commission meeting is October 28th, and it's possible that the developer may submit plans then to seek a new certificate of appropriateness. So the question I'm going to ask to the folks here on this call is, what do you think, or how do you think the city should respond to the demolition of the Hyde House by this developer? And Julia and Rick, thank you for clarifying. It's not in Oak Hill Park. As Ally had mentioned, it's Oak Hill, not Oak Hill Park. So again, the question is, how should the city respond to the demolition of the Gershom Hyde House by this developer? Should we take legal action against the developer and take the property? Should we prohibit this developer from ever building in Newton again? Should we allow the developer to continue to work only if his plans recreate the historic character of the original structure? Should we levy new prohibitive penalties for violating historic zoning ordinance to deter the future demolition of historic buildings? Should we take no further action beyond the $300 a day fine? Or is there something else that you'd like to see? So, Ally, I can't see the poll, guys, so just wanted you to know. I have to read the questions off a hard copy. I'm not able to see it.
These answers are coming in. I think we can give folks a few seconds to read through all the answers. And in that second question, it's prohibit this developer from ever building in Newton. So most of these answers, about 50%, are looking like option 1, take legal action against the developer and confiscate the property for violating city ordinances. And I'll give it a bit more time, and then I'll publish those answers so you all can see. We really appreciate you using this tool and following along and engaging with this conversation. I want to say this is also really helpful, and I'm seeing that it's not a single choice. I think that makes a lot of sense as well, more than one answer. All of the above. Appreciate you all putting that in the chat there. I'm going to go ahead and end this poll and publish those answers. And I want to say all of this is super, super helpful, just generally for gathering information, understanding where folks prioritize all of this, what people think is the most important way to respond to this. So this is super helpful. We have about 56% saying take legal action against the developer and confiscate the property for violating city ordinances. And a lot of folks are saying more than one, both 1 and 2 at least. So that's really great to know.
Excellent. So we've got one other follow-up question. If you could decide what to do with the property, what would you choose? Rebuild the house to the original design, move on and build new structures on the land, turn the plot into green space, a park, or an orchard, leave it empty and install a plaque commemorating the old house, or other. And the other you can put in the chat.
Got some answers coming in. Looking like so far from who has answered rebuilding the house to the original design or turning the plot into green space, a park, or an orchard, that's where a lot of these votes are coming in. Other, Carolyn said, I think they should build the house as it was originally planned to the historical blueprint. Green space, 1 and 3. Again, multiple choice seems like here. I'm going to go ahead and end that poll and publish those results. By a hair, turn the plot into green space, a park, or an orchard. But I think that rebuild the house to the original design is a very close second. Again, thank you all for answering these questions. Back to you, Amy.
So I want to open it up to discussion because I think there are a lot of thoughts here about what's the best approach. Before I go, and I mean, it's up to you guys unless you want to hear what I would do as mayor, but if you want to weigh in more detail about what you'd like to see, not only how you'd like the historical commission and the mayor and the city to respond to this egregious action, or how you would like to see the property reused. I know we have the results from the poll, but there may be more meat to what you'd like to add to it. I see Mary Lee.
Yes, I just want to share. I understand with all the anger about this, the desire to potentially be punitive, but I think what's probably more important is to make sure that we put the appropriate process controls in place so this sort of thing doesn't happen again.
I agree. Does anybody else have a comment?
I'll raise my hand or something.
Okay, Stephen?
Sorry about that.
It's okay.
I think the process controls really are central to the future of the Historical Commission. There are lots of aspects of this that went wrong. But it just can't be denied that this man knew exactly what he was buying into, and he broke his agreements, and there must be a very severe penalty on him. His choice, as we all know, if the Newton Historical Commission were to deny his certificate of appropriateness, his choice would be to take this to the Middlesex Superior Court. And the city should, I think, defend the Newton Historical Commission against him in that venue, if that happens. But there are lots of issues that need to be discussed, and they are not some of the solutions that are being proposed by the Zoning and Planning Commission, in my opinion. I think some of those recommendations, as I understand them, actually weaken the Historic Commission in its efforts to preserve property in the city. And I think the last thing we need to do is weaken their powers. And I certainly don't think we need to have somebody else sitting over their shoulder with authority to negate their decisions. They're professionals. We should appoint them and respect them as professionals, and we should respect their decisions. Thank you.
So I agree, and thank you for that, Stephen. I mean, my position is I think I've made it kind of clear, but if I haven't, here I go. I really believe that the city should take action against this developer. We can't let this developer or any developer get away with destroying what they had permission to do, which was to restore a historic property, and just instead tear it down or allow it to come down. There should be heavy penalties imposed. I don't believe the $300 per day is enough. I think we should take legal action against the developer. We can do that and take them to Middlesex Superior Court. I really wish that our law department were working with our historical commission in tandem to advise them of all the tools that they may have at their available to them in order to enforce on this. I think right now, what we really need to do is wait for the developer to come in, making that request for a certificate of appropriateness and deny it. That's my view. And going towards the issue of changing our process, I definitely believe that we need to look at our ordinances. We're going to have to be look at that under the confines and constructs of chapter our laws, our mass historical laws. But obviously, we need to put in more penalties and enforcement provisions within the local landmark ordinance. Are there questions?
You've got Sally Butchis with her hand raised up at the top.
Okay, Allie?
Hi, everybody. I just have a simple thing to say. The developers are watching and the developers are salivating. That's it.
What does that mean, please?
Thank you, Sally. I'm sorry, Christopher, is that Christopher?
I just said I don't understand what how Sally's comment should be.
What I'm
construed.
saying is at all of these meetings that we have, the developers are listening to the debate and they are on the side of the stage waiting, ready with their tractors and their machinery to knock down the other 25.
Well, I hope that's not the case. I mean, look, I think we have ordinances in place and they've got to be enforced if they are going to be effective, right? So if we don't go and enforce this as a city, then I would have to agree with you, Sally, that developers will take advantage of the fact that the city is not being active in enforcement.
Well, they certainly are not being active. And I can say that from personal experience, since the house across the street from me, which was not a landmark, but it was a historically preserved property, was knocked down as well, with very little consequence to the builder, the developer, who bought it for pennies and sold it for millions. We have no effective enforcement.
So Sally, just to address that, as mayor, I would direct the law department again to penalize the developer to the fullest extent. I know that Rick had put in the chat that he said that the city could not legally take 29 Greenwood. So at some point, I'd like to ask Rick to chime in on that. But that would be something that I would like to explore. But I'd also like to form a committee to discuss potential uses because I don't know that I could just by myself make that determination on what's the best use of that property if we do not rebuild. But again, I would leave that open to community input. So Rick, did you want to chime in about why the city cannot legally take the property?
Sure. I am not a lawyer.
And thank you for joining us, Rick.
Absolutely, absolutely. This is my neighborhood. This is something I'm very upset about as well. And it's my responsibility as elected official from the area to give information. So immediately I talked to the mayor and to the law department, and the first thing that I learned was eminent domain cannot be used in this way. So we can't take the property under eminent domain. If there is another vehicle, I don't know, that a municipality can take a property, all I know about is eminent domain, and it cannot be used in that way. I also, while I have the floor, just want to let everybody know that immediately the law department asked the elected officials to leave this in the hands of the historical commission, where all the power is to deal with this. And David Kalis, Holly, and I are outraged as much as anybody else, but we've been told to let the historical commission run the process. So I'm here in complete support. I like the question of how we're supposed to deal with this, because we'd all love to do a lot of things. Take the developer to court if we can, great. But short of taking the property, something should be built there. And I know people don't want to hear me say that I would love to see an exact replica. And by the way, in the last meeting, the developer and how they were, the attorney for the developer, how they were talking about replicating was not to my standard. I mean, if we're going to recreate this home as best as we can, and if you've been looking at the chat and reading Alice Ingerson's comments, there aren't blueprints to this house. It goes far too back, but we have some history on the home. And I, for one, would like to see an exact replica, painstakingly, costly, rebuilt on this site. And I also would like to revisit, I don't know legally if we can, but we also the historical commission gave the right for an addition on this home, which I think that's a penalty he should serve, which is to not be allowed to put that addition on to realize a higher value in his resale. I think he should rebuild what was there to an exact replica. Otherwise, I don't know what other actions we can take. Thanks, Amy, for giving me the time.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you for chiming in. I just have to disagree with you. I guess I'm not looking at the taking as eminent domain. I see it as similar to when we took the property at, I think it was 40 Rogers Street over by Crystal Lake, where there was the opportunity to purchase the house. So if this developer is going to be penalized legally for his actions of demolishing a historic resource, and he is forced to not be able to do anything with that property, my guess is he will try to sell, or at that point, we can come in and try to take the property. I don't see eminent domain being used as an enforcement mechanism, so I would agree with you that you cannot use it as an enforcement mechanism. But just from my own legal background, I would suggest that you could still penalize the developer for what he has done, and then take the property.
Let me just say
So
that, yep, let me just say that if there is any vehicle to take this property into the hands of the city for complete control and to take it out of the hands of Mr. Gupta, I'd be all in favor of that.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Rick.
Absolutely, but up until
We
this point,
appreciate that.
absolutely, but up until this point, I don't see legally the vehicle. And if we can't do that, I'm looking to the next best thing. But I'd be with you on that, absolutely.
Excellent. Does anybody else have any comments?
Well, if there were a way to take control of the property and control its redevelopment and restoration and force Gupta to pay for that, that would be ideal in my view.
Okay, that's good.
I'd like to say something. It's right next to my house. I have property there.
Oh, hi,
And
Carolyn.
Hi, how are you, Amy? I'm so happy about this meeting and what everybody's sharing. I'm in agreement with everybody. I just feel that the whole idea of being able to get the property, as Amy you would hope, would be the way to go. And maybe we could do something with make it a city-run program for the need of the community, of the high school, getting your children getting involved with nature back there. I mean, I have property. I could work with the city on that, to share it, or have them do gardening, or I mean, there's many avenues to that. So something that we could, in the future, talk about.
Well, that's interesting that you bring that up, because my understanding is that there was an orchard on the property. Is that right?
But this, the land that we bought that was next to that house had 100 years worth of invasives. That it took 20 truckloads of removal of the invasives. I've restored it to its natural setting, and I put a little pond in there, which is beautiful for frogs and animals. So it's I own through the forest there. So I have most of the property around the house, but to be able to create something as a community effort for that, to restore it to its original little schoolhouse setting, would be remarkable. And then make it something that the city, that maybe the Parks and Rec could also use it as a place for people to learn about different things about nature. I mean, I just think that it's like a gem that could be used for the city. Anyway,
Thank you.
Having said that, my concern about zoning and it's just a rarity that we get to talk as residents, sharing our concerns and being listened to, because I right now don't feel like the leadership in Newton is really listening to the residents. I think they're in cahoots with the developers, and they're not really caring about what we have to say. And that's my dismay. That's why, Amy, if you could take a lead on this, that would be I think you need to take a flag on something like this in order to get people's attention and vote for you. Because I think otherwise the powers that be keep their controls. That's my advice.
Well, thank
to
you, Carol.
As a resident, I feel like if you held that flag high and what you want to do here, it's a strong conviction. Because, Newton was a beautiful city with the historical quaintness, and that's all going away, and it's a crime. And those people that cherish it are going to leave, and it'll be a different, like a metro system, sort of what happened to Brookline. It becomes, it doesn't define itself. It becomes like a transient area. So I feel like if you uphold the history, you uphold the intention of good people, the integrity of good people. So that's all I want to say. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much, Carolyn.
Yeah.
So Julia, did you have your hand up? I'm sorry.
Yeah, a few things. First of all, this was not the first time something like this happened. Just a year earlier at 959 Chestnut Street in the Upper Falls Historic District, that house where he'd gotten permission from the Upper Falls Local Historic District Commission to add on to it, that developer allowed that house to fall down. And
So Julia, was that the one that was appealed by the MAPC?
appealed, the Local Historic District Commission said he had to rebuild exactly what was there. He built it 3 feet higher and made some other changes. Historical Commission said that's not good enough. He appealed to MAPC. MAPC said, oh, try to work it out. And that's basically where it stands now. So the sort of lack of firmness, backing up Newton kind of invites more of the same. And I wanted to also say that, the idea of requiring, first of all, we could ban this developer, but it gets tricky because every project is a different LLC, and we might know this guy's name, but is he going to be involved in something else behind the scenes? Similarly, I would not trust him with rebuilding this house, and I think legally it's called specific performance. You're telling somebody to do something, and it's very hard to get somebody to do something exactly right. And if he couldn't even restore it right, how are we going to trust him to rebuild the replica? Another thing that's frustrating to me, and I asked about this at the Historical Commission meeting, yes, the $300 a day fine is woefully inadequate, but we're not even imposing it. It's just sort of running up. So it's not even something that he has to keep paying a check every month.
Well, theoretically, it is accumulating, and theoretically,
right.
Once there is a determination on whether he can move forward or not, that fine will be assessed. I am still of the opinion that it's just not adequate.
Oh, absolutely not adequate. But when I asked about it at the meeting, the city solicitor's representative said something that was a little bit hazy about whether it would be negotiated down or something like that. And what if the LLC goes bankrupt before this is all resolved? And another, I think, concern that some people have is that are there certain deadlines that are not going to be met if this drags out indefinitely?
So I do have a question on that, because as I was looking at, I think it was a response from the law department, and it referred me to the demolition delay ordinance. I wasn't sure with the stop work order how long the inspectional services commissioner can keep that stop work order in effect. I believe it's 2 years, but I'm not sure on how those two ordinances interplay. But I'm going to go to Rena. Rena, you had your hand up, and then I'm going to go to Greg.
Unmute myself. And Amy, I want to thank you for hosting this forum, because I think it's really important to have a conversation of the community outside of, the city construct, either in front of the Newton Historic Commission. I think it's really important that the community engages and has a conversation about specifically the demolition of 29 Greenwood. Let me just start by saying the Newton Historic Commission has been ill-advised by the city's law department. And I would suggest to you that, in fact, the demolition delay ordinance has no applicability here. That, in fact, this violation is a violation of the landmark ordinance. And there is no process within a violation of demolition within the landmark ordinance to remediate a violation of demolishing a landmark. So that's where we stop and start. And we understand that, in fact, there is no recourse, and it's inappropriate for the NHC to be considering, the Newton Historic Commission to be considering the proposal that's in front of them now. So it needs to be understood that whatever is brought to the Newton Historic Commission needs to be denied, so that then Mr. Gupta has options, in terms of going into court, as well as the abutters that have standing in order to go into court. And it is only within court that we will be able to resolve this. So that's where I stop and start, is that we need to be in the appropriate place of our city laws in order to be in the correct place to move forward within the Newton Historic Commission.
Thank you, Rena. Absolutely agree with you. Greg?
Well, I have no expertise in the ordinances, but I do find this outrageous. I do want this to be rectified in some way. And although I don't want to be unnecessarily punitive, I think there has to be some sort of punitive consequences for somebody doing this. Otherwise, there is nothing standing in the way of somebody with deep pockets running roughshod over whatever ordinances we have. And I mean, I assume the town has laws against vandalism. And it strikes me that willful vandalism, even though it's private property, if it's a historic building, there is a public aspect to it. There really ought to be, I would like to see criminal consequences for somebody doing this, but I suppose that's not on the offing. But I think it's that serious. Otherwise, these people will not get the message that this kind of behavior will not be tolerated.
Well, Greg, that's interesting because that kind of circles back to Marshall in the beginning when he was talking about what can we do going forward in terms of making our process and strengthening our ordinances. And from my research, I understand that you can have penalties for violating ordinance provisions that may include fines. You can have requirements to restore or pay for willfully damaged landmarks, which in this case, this is what happened.
Yes.
You can denial permission to rebuild on sites where landmarks were illegally demolished, as in this case, and you can even try to get jail time. So that goes into your criminal aspect of it. So Marshall, I hope that sort of circled back to what you had raised. I see Alan and then Barbara.
Thank you.
So I'm going to just address this in a different way.
Okay.
I do not understand why the current mayor has not directed the law department, who I believe reports administratively to the mayor. I hope, Amy, that there's a different mayor coming out of November.
I hope so too.
Yeah, no, I understand that. But it seems to me that we ought to exert some pressure on the current mayor of addressing this question. I think she's done everything she could to sort of walk away from it. And I don't do that from a point of view of promoting a pathway for her winning. But I think it's an important thing that we don't try to sort of decide what the law is or how the law department ought to address it. I think that's a responsibility of that law department. What they need is some direction, and they're not getting it. And I think we ought to exert some pressure on the mayor. I frankly thought her response to all of this was, well, it's not in my department. It's all the protection of the property from a historic point of view. That's just a plain cop-out. So I would hope that others would join me. And Steve, you did such a marvelous job in assembling this group of people and getting everybody's signatures. I really hope you would take on that challenge in terms of a letter that's directed to the current mayor, and hopefully only for the short term. Thank you.
Thank you, Alan. Barbara?
Hi, Amy. Thank you very much. I'm Barbara Wales, and I actually sit on the Newtonville Local Historic District. I've been on that commission since its inception. And when you become mayor, I would like to continue in that capacity, just so you know. In my experience, we've talked about revising the rules of how do we process this. One of the things that I would like to see you also consider is it's not just developers, but it's also homeowners homeowners have similar violations, maybe not quite to this extent, but I think it's very important that that aspect also be brought forward. And what I have struggled with my fellow commissioners has been, and I know this is a little bit off topic, but homeowners who will come in with kind of a mea culpa attitude and then throw their hands up and say, oh, it's a hardship. And there's no metrics for hardship. And so, you know, as we look at how do we manage these and, deal with them, I think that's something important that needs to be being addressed. That's all I had to say. Thank you.
Oh, thank you for bringing that up. One of the other things that I had mentioned in the beginning, there's an upcoming Zoning and Planning Committee meeting this Thursday. Already the Zoning and Planning Committee amended our landmark ordinance. I think that was back in May. So now they're looking at amending our demolition delay ordinance. And I'm just looking at the proposal. So currently, our demolition delay ordinance uses a 50-year threshold for establishing historical significance. And what they're trying to do is change that date, roll that date back. I believe it was to 1945, but I think the current proposal just doesn't have a date. They just don't want a rolling 50 years. Also, I believe the amendments that are being proposed would change historical context language, and that would establish also a secondary review panel to overrule the Newton Historical Commission's decisions. I kind of like our ordinance the way it is. I think it's very effective. I think it allows us to, or our historical commissions, to look at different types of historical houses and their context and help determine whether or not how it grows and how it evolves and what its place is in the community. But that's just my opinion. I don't know if others have an opinion on this, so I'm putting it out there as a question.
I think Stephen has something to say.
Okay, Stephen?
So you're on mute, Stephen.
Mute, yes, thank you. Thank you very much. I think this issue of what the Zoning and Planning Commission is about to discuss this Thursday is very important to the future of preservation in the city. As you mentioned, there is going to be they've pretty much abandoned the notion of having 1945 as the set date, but they're going to consider moving the 50-year determination to 75 years, which means that a great many homes, some say some 3,000, would be no longer under immediate protection by the Historical Commission. I think this commission, this Zoning and Planning Committee ought to leave that alone. Secondly, the historic context. The whole business about 29 Greenwood, in fact, was a huge piece of it, is the fact that it represented the agricultural industry back in the 1700s that was so very important to Newton's prosperity. The whole area around here was huge agricultural property. And I think, although it may have gotten overgrown, I think that some of Carolyn's property still has some of the apple orchards out and back that used to be part of that industry. But context means a whole lot sometimes when you're looking at historic preservation. And then the third piece, which I think is really important, is to have an administrative review process that could overrule a decision by the Newton Historical Commission. Sort of begs the question of why you bother to waste these people's time trying to make an informed professional decision about a property. If a developer knows that they can go back and just get a 3-person committee to overrule the commission, you kind of wonder what's the point in having the commission. And I think that would be disastrous. They did this on the landmarks part. They do have an administrative group, as I understand, or they're proposing it to the full council, to have an administrative group that could in fact overrule the commission. Again, these commissions are appointed because of their professionalism, because of their expertise, either in real estate or preservation. It should be a mix. There should be a healthy conversation on the commission. But to have this current zoning and planning group, it seems to me, make those decisions now and offer them to this mayor just is inappropriate. That we should at the very least wait until the election is over and see who's going to be making decisions about this. That was a national issue, it seems to me, a couple of years ago. But thank you very much for listening.
Oh, thank you, Stephen. If I recall, there was a time when the Newton Historical Commission's admin person, oh, maybe it was Katie Holmes at the time. I do know that there is an administrative process where she vets certain petitions that come before for demolition, and some make it to the Historical Commission and others don't. I remember requesting her to make sure that there was a listing of those properties, and I believe that that listing is contained in the meeting minutes of the Newton Historical Commission. I haven't followed it as closely, but I think there needs to be more transparency about what goes into the determination of those administrative decisions. I don't know if anyone else agrees with that. I see Rena nodding her head. So. Did you want to weigh in on that? Yeah.
You are correct, Amy, that in fact now any of the administratively approved demolitions will show up on the prior, they show up in the meeting minutes. And even Jennifer Bentley is on this call, and she's a current member of the Newton Historic Commission. There is an issue and a question of, whether or not they get oversight in terms of being able to review those ones that are administratively approved. Correct, Jennifer?
Yeah, so Rena, it goes to the preservationist in the city, which used to be Katie Hack's home, now is Val Birmingham. And then Peter Diamond, as our chair, will review them with her. And sometimes when they can't make an obvious decision, it comes back out to us. One of us or two of us will weigh in on a property just to make sure that the properties that are administratively pushed through are done so in a way that basically they put stuff in front of us when they think there might be some questioning or they think it's a property that's obvious that we would need to discuss. So
Right.
They do try to give us everything that they think will be a discussion. And then some things are just administratively put through because we just, the lists get longer and longer as time goes on. So, we don't have unlimited time, and sometimes we do have double meetings to get these things done. But, we're willing to put in the time, and this is really important to all of us. We're all professionally trained in preservation. And so, we want to help out and we want to review as many properties as we can. We just don't have unlimited time to do everything in session. And
Right.
you guys probably don't want to sit there, until midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning doing all these. So, they knock off the ones that are less likely to have a discussion.
Yeah, but I would even suggest, and what's important to understand here is that as Katie had quoted in one of her memos, these are considered like windshield reviews, in the sense of that these properties are just, superficially scanned. And there's a level of, unfortunately, within the planning department, there's not sufficient staffing for preservation. And it's really important to understand of the properties, these 3,200 that are in limbo, it's like 14% of our housing stock, and many of them are more modest and affordable housing stock. And I think of it as being the kind of thing where they haven't been given the benefit of historic review. And I really think it's important for us as a city to really think through what we're doing here. Because I really believe that they both are serving a purpose in terms of providing housing stock to a broad spectrum of our community, but also too, that, you know, it's one thing to review properties and check them off saying that they don't merit preservation, but if you haven't done it, it's a completely different thing.
Well, that's an interesting topic. So Jennifer, I'd be interested to know, are there metrics that Valerie and Peter Diamond used in order to make that determination? If there was ever a question raised by either a member of the public or a member of the commission about one of those properties that was reviewed administratively, is there a process, and is that process made public?
So a lot of the things that come through administratively are minor repairs, like maybe a porch on the back is being replaced, or you know, like sometimes there are full demolitions, and that's noted on the minutes that come through. But like I said, we are able to go through that list, and if we object and want to have further discussion, we can put it back to a discussion. But I don't know if there's anything that is published anywhere in our ordinances that states that. I have no idea. I just do what they tell me to and review what I can and get it done as best I can.
Oh, thank you. I know a lot of things are not contained in our ordinances, but one of the things that I would like to see all of our commissions do is try to have not only similar guidelines, but something that informs the public on how you review a project, whether it's administratively or whether it's through the commissions. What are you looking for? And I know some things are detailed out in our ordinances, but a lot of things sometimes is just through discussion. It's through looking and reviewing plans. And again, the whole concept of having these either local historic district commissions or even the historical commissions in general is try to see if there's a way to preserve, if there's a way to evolve, and allow homeowners to continue to be able to, update their properties and expand if necessary, but to do something like that in context of the historic character of the environment that it's situated in. That's just my 2 cents. So I'm looking at the time and it's 8 o'clock. So I want to thank you so much for joining us this evening. This issue, like so many, I'd like to have discussions like this in forums. So this is important to me, and I hope it's important to you, this concept of the ability to have a back and forth discussion, a safe space to talk about issues that are important, just to know that you are being listened to and heard and responded to. So that's who I am as a candidate. That's who I would be as mayor of the city. If you want to learn more about my campaign, please go to my website at sangiolo.org. And we're going to hold another forum this Wednesday if you're interested in schools. So again, please go to my website for more information. And thank you for your time for coming here tonight. And thank you especially to our city councilors who are on this call, and also to Jennifer, who is a historical commissioner. I see area council members here and also candidates for city council. So thank you.
Okay.
Have a good night, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, Amy.
Bye-bye.
Did you want to stay on, Stephen? Oh.